Welcome. Hello, my pretty people. It has been a hot minute again. My hair color has changed again. We love the green. It's a very pastel shade. It's great. I love it. Neighbors. Mommy scratched me. My kitty, it itches. It's fine. I hope you all are doing wonderfully. I'm glad to be here. Hope you all are glad to be here. And we're just gonna jump right into it, as we do, because this is a reading channel. So let's read. Quick little review, because it's been so long. I want to, as usual, thank the people who commented, namely, it's not Thweet, oh my god. This is how long. I have not been on my channel in a minute. I have been doing a lot of other things, which is okay, but I missed this, so I wanted to do it again. Yeah, because the last one was about a month ago, which was a slack on me. Oh, Wheat. I wanted to call you Thweet. It's a photographer that I followed on Instagram for a very long time, back when Instagram was about photography. It is crazy how this world changes. But Wheat, as usual, I appreciate your exchanges. I laughed when you said you'd still watch if I smoked a pack a day and had a voice like a trucker. Lawnmower, not a trucker. This is my bad. I appreciate that. I'm gonna try to not have a voice like a lawnmower, so we should be okay. Hopefully I don't scream at work not anymore, but there was a weird weekend there. There was a weird weekend and things have mellowed much back. I'm also really excited that you picked up some new books and you enjoyed them. I think, like I said before, I think reading is one of the least incentivized things that we have right now, and it's one of the easiest ways to share information and to also like rest, which is something that we also don't have a lot of in our present society. So sharing ideas, spreading ideas, expanding your ideas, opening your mind to the ideas of plurality and the idea that yes, existence is shared, and also there's a lot of different types of existence. Oh, he's finally eating. My cat is a very picky eater, and he likes to act like he doesn't like I have hiccups. He likes to act like he doesn't like certain foods. We're gonna do this. I have tea in here. You can see there's a tea bag for all those. Let's not get banned. There's a trick I learned in middle school to get rid of hiccups, because I used to get really violent hiccups. It would like shake my whole body and really hurt my ribcage. And I had a music teacher who taught a lot of breath work, that if you drink, like instead of drinking, it's like you have the circle, instead of drinking the part that's closest to you and turning it up, you drink from the part that's farthest from you and you drink upside down, and it forces your body to realign its breathing system essentially, and it makes your diaphragm resynchronize up with your lungs so you stop hiccuping. It's cool. I'm gonna try to not hiccup anymore. Because you have to focus because you're drinking upside down, so it makes you like really concentrate on your breathing or whatever. It's fairly a foolproof method. I've had it work 95% of the time since I've been in middle school, and any of the other tricks never worked. So like holding my breath didn't work, nothing, but this did. All right, I think that's fair enough of an introduction. So I finally got the library card, and I requested from the library Harper Collins book, The Watchman or something like that, to find a Watchman, something like that. And I think they got it in at the library, so I should be able to go get it soon, and we can start reading that. And I might have to like actually make a more consistent number of videos, because libraries have deadlines, and it's not like I can just buy it. And it's one I really want to buy anyways, because HarperCollins is fucking brilliant. That is her name, right? To Kill a Mockingbird, HarperCollins. Am I making up stuff? Oh, what books did you read? Harlequin's Millions, Notes on the Death of Culture, Our Inner Conflicts. I'm not sure I'm familiar with those, at least not by name, but that's not surprising because I'm very trash with names, unless they're physically in front of me. So, oh, I was looking up to make sure I wasn't misnoming. Oh, I am misnoming. So HarperCollins is the publishers, and I do this wrong every time. I'm pretty sure it's Harper Lee. Harper Lee is the American novelist of To Kill a Mockingbird. Okay, so I do that a lot. HarperCollins is the publishing company that is not the amazing, phenomenal woman who wrote To Kill a Mockingbird and Go Set a Watchman. Not Go Find. Go Set a Watchman. Harper Lee. That is the phenomenal woman who wrote those books. So I'm very excited to get that and read that. Notes on the Death of Culture. Essays on Spectacle and Society. Ooh, I just listened to a YouTube video about the Spectacle and Society, which I want to recommend. Let me go find it really quick. One of my friends shared it with me. And it's called Postmodernism is Good Actually, Baudrillard versus Marxism. What channel is it on?
Walk to look like that instead of run.
Oh, to balance my hormones.
Well, how do you know how much walking to do?
Okay, we can skip the ads. I hate this. Okay, so it's by Plastic Pills, their YouTube channel, so you can go ahead and find Plastic Pills. I'll try to attach them down here. I might link this video. But the Spectacle of Society, they talk about the spectacle of society and blah, 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 blah. It was a fascinating listen. I enjoyed it a lot. But it's Postmodernism is Good Actually, Baudrillard versus Marxism, Plastic Pills. I will try to remember to attach a link to this video in my description below. So go take a listen to that. Tell me what you think. I thought it was pretty solid. So you might get a kick out of that if those are the types of stuff you're reading, because I mean that's kind of the vibe that we're on here. So yay. All right, I've taken enough time of an introduction. That's plenty of time. You don't need to listen to me ramble. That's not the point of why we're here. So I'm gonna start reading, because that's why we are here. You know, I got some nice close-ups on my face. Ho ho ho. All right, let's jump into where we are. We're getting back in the rift of things of starting in poetry, and I really like this book that we're gonna read next, which is called How Far You Have Come by their Musings on Beauty and Courage by Morgan Harper Nichols. It's written in a mix of poetry and prose, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it so far. We're on page 13, still in Georgia, and because this book is broken into states. So there's introduction, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California. We're still in Georgia in this. So, the summer of July 1996, Atlanta, Georgia. I awoke at the break of day just in time to see the clouds coming down to touch the earth. I snuck out to the porch and watched the squirrels dance in the trees before the heat set in. I had never been an early riser, but on this day I awoke at the sun's rise to watch my parents hauling our suitcases into the trunk of the Volvo. Today was the day. We were heading back to California for the first time since I was a toddler. I spent the first 2 years of my life in California, and although my memories were foggy, I desperately wanted to return. I clung to my faint memory of the blue Los Angeles ocean air, and I dreamt of the olive green leaves of the palm trees waving in the wind. Even at 6 years old, I had a deep sense that this was the place where my heart belonged. And finally, we were headed back, even if just for a short visit. My heart raced as I paced through the morning mist. I placed my neon sunglasses on my face. Their yellow and pink frames always reminded me of California sunsets. "Can we leave now?" I asked. My parents didn't even hear my question, focused on lugging our bags to the car, diving in and out of the house like birds flying to and fro from their nests. Water bottles, Band-Aids, magazines, cassette tapes, lotions. Did we really need all this? My sister and I had already packed our coloring books, crayons, black and white composition notebooks, and fanny packs stuffed with friendship bracelet beads and Polly Pocket dolls. We had everything we needed. What was taking them so long? I wasn't the only one in a rush. The entire city was abuzz with anticipation. The Summer Olympics were taking place just a few miles away in the center of the city, and it had been the sole topic of conversation around the dinner table for months. We'd watch the news each night to hear endless reporting about the upcoming festivities and events. Whenever we'd drive through downtown Atlanta, we'd see roads closed and construction taking place to accommodate the massive event. We couldn't even go see the laser show at Stone Mountain Park because there was a cycling race happening there. I was slowly beginning to understand that this sporting event was a big deal. But honestly, I didn't care. All I could think about was California, its cliche images of palm trees blowing in the wind and Disney characters walking the streets of Hollywood. Surely we could simply watch the Olympics on TV, right? I was becoming obsessed with heading west, and I knew I couldn't rest until I heard the sound of that Volvo's engine. We had 2,100 miles to go, and we were still at ground zero. My anxious thoughts swelled as the sun crawled higher and higher to the center of the sky. I flopped down on the edge of the front porch. 6 years old and nothing to do but fidget and wait. I couldn't sit still any longer. I began hopping from one porch board to the next as I counted. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. I'd lose track and start again. 5, 10. I felt like every hop I made added 5 more minutes to the clock. The sun was shining brightly overhead, and its beams started casting shadows in the opposite direction. This was a big day, and I already felt like it was getting away. "Okay, kids, let's go." I darted toward the car and snapped my seatbelt into place before my mother could even finish her thought. I restlessly set my gaze outside the window toward the dazzling asphalt, watching for the first indication of Georgia's hot earth rolling behind me. I positioned my crayons and colored pencils at the ready and set my fanny pack with care on the armrest. Tonight, we could be halfway to California by tonight. My dad fired up the engine and we began our journey to the interstate. I looked down at my wrist and noticed my watch was missing, but I wasn't too concerned. My mind was moving too fast for the second hand anyway. Time could not contain me. But of course, I was 6, so I couldn't help myself. I looked at the clock on the Volvo's dashboard. "Is that the right time?" "Yep, that's right," Dad replied. I gasped in disbelief. It was nearly 5 o'clock. Where had the day gone? There was no way we would be in Texas by that evening, not even with the aid of time zones. I was practically a math expert at this point, after spending the whole day on the front porch counting my way to 1,000,000 and back. I dropped my shoulders and sunk my chin into the palm of my hand, fixing my eyes outside the window. The sun would set soon, and all I could think about was how we were miserably behind. This was not my plan. Sulking in my seat, I stared out the window and looked at the signs marked Atlanta. What a disappointment. It seemed we were making no progress at all. I had seen these streets on the TV a few nights previous, and I knew we were getting close to the hub of the big games. Traffic stalled as we neared the place where the famous Olympic torch had ignited the sky like fireworks for the first time a few nights ago. Ugh, I thought, another delay. I looked out the window to see a 20-story mural painted with faces of people from around the world on the side of a hotel lining the interstate. Apricot, sepia, bronze, gold, earth tone, sienna. It seemed like every color my crayon box could hold was used to create that mural, plus 1,000 more. For the first time all day, I slowed my thoughts and turned into the world right before me. I had never seen a canvas big enough to hold every color God created, but I think this mural may have captured all of them. I looked at the faces, some young, some wrinkled, a multitude of people painted on this wall. I took off my sunglasses but quickly replaced them, realizing how they magically transformed the world into richer tones. Just beyond the mural, I saw the 116-foot silver tower holding the cauldron for the Olympic torch. Bystanders flooded the bridge that stretched toward the tower. They huddled close, holding their cameras and backpacks, all while wrangling their kids so they didn't get lost in the masses. All roads pointed here, to Atlanta, to gather around this roaring light. The globe came together for a moment to celebrate every nation around the world. The people pressed against one another on that bridge captivated my attention and stirred my sulking spirit. Time froze as I watched them. I witnessed the world existing in light together, a universal expression of pride right in my backyard. As we were parked there on the highway, I realized that perhaps this was how it was meant to be. If we had left when my heart desired, we would have missed this clamoring scene. The whole world was right here in Georgia, and I almost missed this scene of beauty because I was too busy racing toward the next one. And even though we caught only a glimpse of the torch's fire on the bridge, it changed me. I felt connected to something bigger than the tick of the clock. I looked to my left, and I noticed my sister with the same wonder on her face too. What a gift it was to be inconvenienced. When we always have the choice to look, listen, and delight in the beauty that is before us. We have to train ourselves to look for light and hope, no matter if we're moving at our preferred pace or not. Not an easy lesson for a 6-year-old, but somehow it seeped in. I was where I was meant to be, even when I thought I should be somewhere else by then. The Volvo started to pick up more speed now, and I took one last look out the back window at the bridge, the tower, and the mural. I imagined how the midnight sky would be lit by the torch's magnificence tonight. I almost asked Dad if we could stay, but I stopped just short of it. No, I thought, enjoy the moment as it unfolds. Nothing more, nothing less. Time was ticking, but it was not ticking against us. I didn't need to rush, but rather, look and listen. Take the day in, and always wear sunglasses. We are going to jump ahead to This Is Your Mind on Plants by Michael Pollan. We've been having a good little run with him. Thoroughly enjoyable. Stuff. Okay. I think we might be on chapter 1. I don't know. We're still in opium. So it says a 1. I'm not sure where I am. Before recounting my own adventures among the poppies and encounters with the poppy police, I need to tell you a little about this acquaintance, since he was the inspiration for my own experiments in poppy cultivation as well as the direct cause of my first flush of my paranoia. His name is Jim Hogshire. He first came to my attention a few years ago when this magazine published an excerpt from Pills A Go-Go, one of the wittier and more informative of the countless zines that sprang up in the early 90s, when desktop publishing first made it possible for individuals single-handedly to publish even the narrowest of special interest periodicals. Hogshire's own special interest, his passion really, was the world of pharmaceuticals, the chemistry, the regulation, and effects of licit and illicit drugs. Published on multicolored stock, more or less whenever Hogshire got around to it, Pills A Go-Go printed inside news about the pharmaceutical industry alongside first-hand accounts of Hogshire's own self-administered drug experiments. Pill hacking, he called it. The zine had a strong libertarian populist bent, and was given to attacking the FDA, DEA, and AMA with gusto whenever those institutions stood between the American people and their pills. Pills that Hogshire regarded with a reverence born of their astounding powers to heal as well as to alter the course of human history and, not incidentally, consciousness. Hogshire's reports on his drug experiments made for amusing reading. I particularly remember his description, reprinted in this magazine, on the effects of a deliberate overdose of dextromethorphan hydrobromide, or DM, a common ingredient in over-the-counter cough syrups and nighttime cold remedies. After drinking 8 ounces of Robitussin DM, Hogshire reported waking up at 4 a.m. and determining that he should now shave and go to Kinko's to get some copies made. That may seem normal, but the fact was that I had a reptilian brain. My whole way of thinking and perceiving had changed. I got in the shower and shaved. While I was shaving, I thought that for all I knew, I was hacking my face to pieces. Since I didn't see any blood or feel any pain, I didn't worry about it. Had I looked down and seen that I had grown another limb, I wouldn't have been surprised at all. I would have just used it. The world became a binary place of dark and light, on and off, safety and danger. I sat at my desk and tried to write down how this felt so I could look at it later. I wrote down the word Cro-Magnon. I was very aware that I was stupid. Luckily, there were only a couple of people in Kinko's, and one of them was a friend. She confirmed that my pupils were of different sizes. One was out of round. I knew there was no way I could know if I was correctly adhering to social customs. I didn't even know how to modulate my voice. Was I talking too loud? Did I look like a regular person? I understood that I was involved in a big contraption called civilization and that certain things were expected of me, but I could not comprehend what the hell those things might be. I found being a reptile kind of pleasant. I was content to sit there and monitor my surroundings. I was alert, but not anxious. Every now and then I would do a reality check to make sure I wasn't masturbating or strangling someone, because of my vague awareness that more was expected of me than just being a reptile. My interest in Hogshire's drug journalism was mild and strictly literary. As I've mentioned, my own experiments with drugs were past, and never terribly ambitious to begin with. I'd been too terrified ever to try hallucinogens, and my sole experience with opiates had accompanied some unpleasant dental work. I'd grown some marijuana once in the early 80s, when doing so was no big deal, legally speaking. But things are different now. Growing a handful of marijuana plants today could cost me my freedom in my house. We may not hear as much now about the war on drugs as we did in the days of Nancy Reagan, William Bennett, and Just Say No. But in fact, the drug war continues unabated. If anything, the Clinton administration is waging it even more intensely than its predecessors, having spent a record $15 billion on drug enforcement last year and added federal death penalties for so-called drug kingpins, a category defined to include large-scale growers of marijuana. Every autumn, police helicopters equipped with infrared sensors traced regular flight paths over the farm fields in my corner of New England. Just the other day, they spotted 30 marijuana plants tucked into a cornfield up the road from me, less than 100 yards, as the crow flies, from my garden. For all I know, the helicopters peered down into my garden on their way. The Supreme Court has recently ruled that such overflights do not constitute an illegal search of one's property, one of a string of recent rulings that have strengthened the government's hand in fighting the drug war. Overflights and other such measures have certainly proved an effective deterrent with me. And anyway, the few times I've had access to marijuana in the last few years, my biggest problem was always finding the time to smoke it. Whatever else it may be, recreational drug use is a leisure activity, and leisure is something in woefully short supply at this point in my life. No small part of the pleasure I got from reading Hogshire's drug adventures consisted of nostalgia for a time when I could set aside a couple of hours, even a whole day, to see what it might feel like to have a reptilian brain. Nowadays, what leisure time I do have tends to be spent in the garden, a passion that in recent years has turned into a professional interest. I am, among other things, a garden writer. I mention this to help explain the keen interest I took in Jim Hogshire's subsequent project, a somewhat unconventional treatise on gardening titled Opium for the Masses, published in 1994 by an outfit in Port Townsend, Washington, called Lumpanics Unlimited. The book's astonishing premise is that anyone can obtain opiates cheaply and safely, and maybe even legally, or at least beneath the radar of the authorities, who, if Hogshire was to be believed, were overlooking something rather significant in their pursuit of the war on drugs. According to Hogshire's book, it is possible to grow opium from legally available seeds. He provided detailed horticultural instructions. or, to make matters even easier, to obtain it from poppy seed pods, which happen to be one of the more popular types of dried flowers sold in florist and craft shops. Whether grown or purchased, fresh or dried, these seed pods contain significant quantities of morphine, codeine, and thebaine, the principal alkaloids found in opium. Hogshire's claim flew in the face of everything I'd ever heard about opium, that the right kind of poppies grow only in faraway places like the Golden Triangle of Southeast Asia, that harvesting opium requires vast cadres of peasant workers armed with special razor blades, and that the extraction of opiates is a painstaking and complicated process. Hogshire made it sound like child's play. In addition to the horticultural advice, opium for the masses offered simple recipes for making poppy tea from either store-bought or homegrown poppies. And Hogshire reported that a cup of this infusion, which is apparently a traditional home remedy in many cultures, would reliably relieve pain and anxiety, pain and anxiety, and, quote, produce a sense of well-being and relaxation. Bigger doses of the tea would produce euphoria after a waking sleep populated by dreams of a terrific vividness. Hogshire cautioned that the tea, like all opiates, was addictive if taken too many days in a row. Otherwise, its only notable side effect was constipation. As for the legal implications, Hogshire was encouragingly vague. Opium, the juice of the poppy, is a controlled substance, but it's unclear how illegal the plant itself is. Here's how I figured out one might be able to toe the line safely between the cultivation of opium poppies, routine enough in the gardening world, and felony possession of opium. If opium is the extruded sap of the unripe seed pod, then dried earth heads used to make tea by definition did not involve one with opium. Hogshire didn't go quite that far, but he did write that, quote, it is unclear whether it is illegal to brew tea from poppies you've purchased legally from the store. As will soon become evident, Jim Hogshire is no longer unclear on either of these points. Last winter, Hogshire's lively little paperback joined the works of Penelope Hobhouse on gardening, Gertrude Jekyll, Gardener's Testament, and Louise B. Wilder, Color in My Garden, on my bedside table. Winter is when the gardener reads and dreams and draws up schemes for the borders he will plant come spring. And the more I read about what the ancient Sumerians had called the flower of joy, the more intriguing the prospect of growing poppies in my garden became, aesthetically as well as pharmacologically. From Hogshire, I drifted over to the more mainstream garden writers, many of whom wrote extravagantly of opium poppies, of their ephemeral outward beauty, for the blooms last but a day or two, and their dark inward mystery. Poppies have cast a spell over gardeners and artists for many centuries, went one typical garden writer's lead. This was inevitably quickly followed by the phrase, dark connotations of the opium poppy. But nowhere in my reading did I find a clear statement that planting Papaver somniferum would put a gardener on the wrong side of the law. When grown in a garden, one authority on annuals declared, somewhat ambiguously, the cultivation of P. somniferum is a case of honig soit kimal ipens, shame to him who thinks ill. In general, the garden writers tended to ignore or gloss over the legal issue and focus instead on the beauty of somniferum, which all concurred was exquisite. Reading about poppies that winter, I wondered if it was possible to untangle the flower's physical beauty from the knowledge of its narcotic properties. It seemed to me that even the lady garden writers, who, presumably, would never think of sampling opium, had been subconsciously influenced by its mood-altering potential. Louise B. Wilder tells us that poppies set her heart vibrating with their waywardness. Merely to gaze at a poppy was to feel dreamy, to judge by the many American Impressionist paintings of the flower, or from the experience of Dorothy and her company, who you'll recall were interrupted on their journey through Oz when they passed out in a field of scarlet poppies. If there ever was an innocent angle from which to gaze at the opium poppy, our culture seems long ago to have forgotten where it is. By now I too was falling under the spell of the opium poppy. I dug on my college edition of De Quincey's Confessions of an English Opium Eater, and I reread Coleridge's description of his opium dreams. How divine that repose is, when a spot of enchantment, a green spot of fountains and flowers and trees in the very heart of a waste of sands. Nope, we're gonna pause. There's too many pages. There's too many pages. It's not like that, but I do want to pause. We were here. That way maybe I can remember. And we should be okie dokie. I will be RB. I am tired as shit. For no reason. Well, for lots of reasons, but... Where I am, it got warm recently for a little bit, and now it's cold again. And I just want winter to be over. I love that my hair matches these lights. It's cool. I really like this color. It really came out dope. And it's already started fading. So like, I bought a second one because it wasn't, I have a lot of hair. And so it usually takes more dye. And I was only able to get like kind of a thin coat on it. So in order to make a more lasting color, I got a second bottle and I'm gonna put it in. It's been like a week since I've done it. A week and a half, about a week. Been about a week. Yeah. Still have to find a new barber still. Everyone I try, every single time I try one, there's always a flippin' issue. We haven't read this in a minute, so we're gonna jump into it, back into it. A People's Guide to Capitalism by Hadas Thier. Chapter 3, Money. The man behind the curtain. There's a quote from Capital by Marx and Engels, Volume 1. We see then that commodities are in love with money, but that the course of true love never did run smooth. The man behind the curtain. Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain, said a frazzled old man standing by a console of lovers. Behind the smoke and flames of the towering, disembodied head of the famed Wizard of Oz stood an ordinary, unremarkable old man. Such, too, is the story of money. Its mysterious power determines the laws by which we live. Yet behind its frightening mystique is a simple man-made solution to the demands of a market-based system of trade. Pieces of paper, or computerized electronic bits in our bank accounts, representing currency, seem to have limitless control over our lives. Whether you have it and how much of it you have determines whether you eat or go hungry, whether you're entitled to the finest health care money can buy, or are left bleeding to death at the hospital's door. Whether your children will be treated to an elite educational facility, or patted down routinely by the cops for living in a high-crime neighborhood. Whether you are politically connected and taken care of in the halls of Washington, or whether you have to fight to even have your vote be counted. Money is so woven into the fabric of our daily lives that we rarely stop to wonder how it got to be that these pieces of paper have come to dominate our lives. Every day it slips in and out of our hands, Every time we get on the train to work or fill up our car with gas, stop for a sandwich, pay the electric bill to keep the lights on and the internet running, get an item of clothing, or a piece of furniture. Each of these things is procured by money. It seems as natural as the air we breathe. Marx took great pains to break down the processes and logic underlying the physical appearance of money. Money, or the money form, as Marx explained, is simply a particular physical format representing the development of quote-unquote value in market-based societies. It is a universal measure against which all commodities reflect their value. As we said at the end of the last chapter, we can count the worth of a pen and a lifesavers as 10 cents, instead of saying that they both embody an equal amount of labor time. Having a universal measure of value is critical to any society that depends on trade and exchange, even relatively simple barter economies. Imagine a marketplace in which the bearers of each commodity, a furniture maker, a baker, and many other producers, have to determine their value of their commodity relative to every other commodity in the market. This would lead to a dizzying number of equations. Enter money. Rather than saying that your chair is worth 10 times as much as a loaf of bread, and 100 times as much as a ballpoint pen, and a quarter of an iPhone case, ad infinitum, it is much easier to say that it is worth $10. If all other commodities are measured this way, the ratio with which they exchange with each other will be easily determined. And if those $10 can easily fit into your bag and be spent wherever you see fit, this eases the entire process. Mainstream economies assume that money determines the values of commodities and that somehow through its own power, money creates circulation and exchange. But as Marx argued, the relationship is in reverse. The existence of money is determined by the value, congealed units of socially necessary labor time, of commodities. Because all commodities have values embodied within them, they can be measured against each other and given a price tag with money. It is not that money, quote, renders commodities commensurable, quite the contrary, because all commodities, as values, are objectified human labor, and therefore in themselves commensurable. Their values can be communicably measured in one and the same specific commodity, and this commodity can be converted into the common measure of their values, that is, into money. Money as a measure of value is the necessary form of appearance of the measure of value which is immanent in commodities, namely labor time. In fact, money plays several simultaneous roles. Within the circulation process, as we've discussed, it measures and reflects the values of commodities by providing a price tag. It then eases the process of circulation of those commodities by functioning as a convenient and easily portable medium of exchange. Finally, money can also be removed from the circulation process to serve as a store of value over time. How did money come to play these roles? This is a problem of both history and logic. To understand the logic of money and to unveil the man behind the curtain, it's useful to follow Marx in a brief, albeit somewhat abstract, detour through the pages of Capital. Following this theoretical illustration, we will then outline a brief history of how money concretely developed over time along with capitalism. Finally, once these foundations are in place, we'll return to the question of the relationship between value, money, and price. In Volume 1 of Capital, Marx introduced the equation 20 yards of linen equals 1 coat. This equation was not meant to describe a concrete or historical reality, though it's possible that at some point in some place one could trade 20 yards of linen for a coat. Instead, 20 yards of linen equals 1 coat served as a launching point for Marx to take us from point A to point B to point C on a theoretical exposition, which ended with an understanding of the role of money. At face value, the meaning of this equation is self-evident. The amount of socially necessary labor time that it takes to produce 20 yards of linen is equal to the amount of socially necessary labor time that it takes to produce 1 coat. But Marx picked apart this seemingly simple equation by distinguishing between the two poles of this equation. The 20 yards of linen, he explained, is the relative value, and the coat is its equivalent value. By relative value, Marx meant that the linen's value is the one being determined. It is the active part of the equation. The relative value asks the question, how valuable, relatively speaking, is 20 yards of linen? The equivalent value, on the other hand, is simply an item of equivalent value to the linen. It plays a passive part of the equation, a marker of how much value is embodied in 20 yards of linen. The coat does not have an independent role, it only reflects the value that is embodied in the linen. The equivalent value answers the question, how valuable is 20 yards of linen? With the answer, it holds one coat's worth of value. As Marx explained, the relative and equivalent forms are two inseparable moments, which belong to and mutually condition each other. It does us no good to say that 20 yards of linen equals 20 yards of linen. The relative value of linen can only be expressed in another commodity's equivalent value. Now, if the marker of linen wants to trade her linen for tea, she'll need to measure the relative value of her linen by the measurement of tea. She may find that her 20 yards of linen is also equivalent to 10 pounds of tea. So in this case, the tea becomes the equivalent, or the measure of the linen's value. If the linen maker wanted to trade her linen for sandals, she may find that 20 yards finds its equivalent in 2 pairs of shoes. The linen, explained Marx, quote, by virtue of the form of value, no longer stands in a social relation with merely one other kind of commodity, but with the whole world of commodities as well. As a commodity, it is a citizen of that world. At the same time, the endless series of expressions of its value implies that, from the point of view of the value of the commodity, the particular form of use value in which it appears, its equivalent value is a matter of indifference. End quote. What Marx is saying is that the specifics of whether linen's value is being measured against tea or sandals or coats doesn't matter. What matters is the amount of abstract human labor objectified in each. These items lose their subjectivity as they become simple units of measurements of the value of linen. They can become equivalents only because they, like linen, embody human labor in the form of value. Despite the coat's buttoned-up appearance, the linen recognizes in it a splendid kindred soul, the soul of value. As markets develop, the limitations of these equations become self-evident. Whereas societies that only bartered specific products could do so in accordance with ritual or traditional procedures, generalized exchange and commerce required a great number of such equivalent relationships. As Ernest Mandel explained, quote, the relations of equivalence concern no longer just two products or two categories of product, but an infinite variety of different goods. It is no longer the labor time of the potter that is compared with that of the agriculturist. 10, 20, 30 different crafts have to compare their respective productive efforts from time to time. In order that these exchanges may go on without interruption, the owners of the commodities must be able to get rid of their goods before they have had the luck to encounter purchasers who possess the products they themselves want to obtain in exchange for these goods. Imagine going to a mall to procure a cookbook. You have 40 pounds of tea with you, and you go up to the owner of the bookstore and pull out a sheet of endless equations. Well, I see here that my 40 pounds of tea are equal to 80 yards of linen, or 4 coats, or 8 pairs of shoes, and scroll down until you find, it's equal to 2 books. And then the bookseller has to confirm with her sheet of endless equations, well, I see my book is equal to such and such and such and such, and 20 pounds of tea. The problem, Marx argued, is one, that the equation is incomplete because the series of its representations never comes to an end. 2, that it is a motley mosaic of disparate and unconnected expressions of value. And 3, that each commodity will have its own endless series of expressions of value, which are all different from the relative form of value of every other commodity. So the solution to this inefficient and incomplete set of equations is to flip the equation around. So now it would read, 1 coat or 10 pounds of tea or 2 shoes, and so on, are all equal to 20 yards of linen. Now linen becomes not only the equivalent part of the equation, but it becomes a universal equivalent against which all commodities are measured. So no matter which store I go to, every store owner sells their commodities on the basis of how many yards of linen they're worth. This equation, quote, imposes the character of universal equivalent on the linen, which is the commodity excluded as equivalent from the whole world of commodities, end quote. The linen becomes the bearer of abstract, undifferentiated human labor. Again, Marx wasn't making a historical point here about linen's role in the market. He was demonstrating how any single commodity, whether it be linen, cigarettes, cattle, or silver, could be assigned such a role. If we now replace linen with gold, and eventually gold with paper bills, the absurdity and mystique of money is uncovered. Marx wrote, quote, if I state that coats or boots stand in relation to linen because the latter is the universal incarnation of abstract human labor, the absurdity of the statement is self-evident. Nevertheless, when the producers of coats and boots bring these commodities into a relation with linen, or with gold or silver, and this makes no difference here, as the universal equivalent, the relations between their own private labor and the collective labor of society appears to them in exactly this absurd form. The role of universal equivalent has, in fact, been filled by different commodities over time. At the dawn of petty commodity production, the first universal equivalents were often those goods that were most commonly exchanged, and were either of fundamental importance to the economies, example, food or tools, or were ornaments frequently used. Eventually, as we'll see below, the role came to be played most significantly by gold. As economics professor Doug Orr explained in an article for Dollars and Cents magazine, quote, "The things that get used as money have changed over time, and modern people often chuckle when they hear about some of them. The Romans used salt, from which we get the word salary. South Sea Islanders used shark's teeth, and several societies actually used cows. The three wise men bought gold, frankincense, and myrrh, each of which was money in different regions at the time. If money does not exist, or is in short supply, it will be created. In prisoner of war camps, where guards specifically outlaw its existence, prisoners used cigarettes instead. In the American colonies, the British attempted to limit the supply of British pounds, because they knew that by limiting the supply of money, they could hamper the development of independent markets in the colonies. To overcome this problem, the colonists began to use tobacco leaves as money." Sweating money. Nope, we're going to stop. Money is literally whatever object we use in relation with everything else, so we can give it an equivalent exchange. Weird. All right, we are going to end with S by J.J. Abrams and Doug Dorst, with its magical ship of Theseus and its wonderful notes and its back and forth. So I did a little bit of reading on like how people tend to read this book, and obviously reading out loud makes it a completely different game as well. And someone suggested reading it 4 times. The first time just reading the story of the ship of Theseus, the second time going through and reading the old notes that are there, and then the new notes, because there's different colors of notes that are written in the margins based off who was writing them. And so they suggest reading it a total of 3 times, and that seems like a lot to me. So I'm just gonna kind of do it like how I was doing it, because I'm a weirdo and remember where I was. Did I get... Okay, let me... What? I feel like I get new things out of this book every time. This is also interesting. I feel like I should. I feel like when we started this, I read something that told me, like, one of these is So apparently I didn't put a bookmark in here. So I feel like we read a copy of this. Please burn the letter once you have read it. All right, I'm feeling slightly overwhelmed on how to approach this. So I'm going to actually not do this one. I've been torn between what story to read next. Because we read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. We didn't read The Restaurant at the End of the Universe, which is a great book. What is this? Alright, I picked up this book for $4 from a store recently. I don't think I want that one either. I feel stuck. Shit. Here, look. Alright. I think I'm going to read this anyways. And I'm going to do a little bit of what they suggested, and I'm going to read based off of what they, how they were kind of suggesting. So we went over this, I think, last time a little bit about how this is it's like a book within a book. It's a book that you're reading about reading it while two other people are reading it. They leave a book in a library or whatever, and the one dude's taking notes in it on the margins. Someone else finds it, starts taking notes as well, and like responding back to them in the margins. So this book is the book with all the writings in the margins in comparison, right? So they suggested reading the actual book itself and then going back through and reading so you can get the idea of the story. This is really so long ago that I don't remember where I was. So I'm just going to start at the point of 2. It's translator's note and forward in the book, The Ship of Theseus. I'm not going to be reading the notes on the side this time, I don't think. So that's not true. I'm going to read some of them. We're going to try to do this. I'm probably going to do like 10 minutes max, and then I'm going to call it quits. So 2 of the translator's note and forward. While I do so with trepidation, I shall encapsulate the most common arguments over candidates, lest readers seek such information from unreliable sources. Some believe that V.M. Straka, the author of The Factory Worker Vaclav Straka, no middle name? No. Wondering, what does the FX stand for in Caldera's name? F equals Francisco or Philip, depends on source. X equals Sabregas. Born 1892 in South Bohemia. Although this argument must strain to account for a newspaper item about the suicide of a man by this name in Prague in 1910. Others, including many soi-disant literary experts, dispute the theory for a different reason. As with the Shakespeare authorship controversy, they argue that these works could not have been written by a man with little formal education. No, they say, it must have been someone else writing under the Straka name, someone with more sterling credentials, such as the Swedish children's author Torsten Ekström, the Scottish philosopher, novelist, and bon vivant Guthrie Mackenzie, or the once revered and now much out of favor Spanish novelist and memoirist Tiago Garcia Ferrara, or the aptly initialed American pulp novelist and screenwriter Victor Martin Summersby, the Canadian adventurer C.F.J. Wallingford, or the German anarchist and polemicist Reinhold Feuerbach, or the noted Czech poet and playwright Cajetan Hruby, or even the French archaeologist, suffragist, novelist Amarante Durand. So we're going to go back. There's some notes on the side that's next to Lois. It says, Professor Moody did a guest lecture on this in my Elizabethan Lit class last year. I hope you ignored every goddamn word he said. Just a guess, you're not a fan. He was my dissertation advisor. It ended badly. Why? In part because he's a liar and a thief. So the clock you're racing, it has to do with Moody? He's about to cash in on my work. Sign-in log says Moody was in the archive yesterday with Esme Emerson Plume. Big New York editor. Means he's close. There's a thing around Amarante Durand, and it says, Amarante Durand and VMS must have known each other. Details in Painted Cave had to come from her. Should I read that one? No. Go back to Braxenholm, the first, and work chronologically. Some allegedly serious people have suggested occult origins, a little girl receiving messages from a 14th century man, an ancient Nazca king, originally from a distant planet, Grand Duchess Olga writing both before and after her murder, and other absurdities, a murderous Serbian nationalist known only as Apis Ammunism. I'd mention that this is also a very cool word, but you'd probably flip out again, so I won't. Yeah, it's good that you didn't. The almost certainly fictional last Spanish pirate, Juan Blas Covarrubias, the proverbial million monkeys, which merit mention only to be scoffed at. I have little interest in arguing about which candidate, plausible, fantastic, or otherwise, for Straka is the strongest. I do not know his birth name, his birthplace, or his native tongue. I do not know his height, his weight, his street address, his work history, or the paths of his travels. I do not know if he committed any of the illegal, subversive, or violent acts of which he has been accused. Examples? 1920 Wall Street bombing, Santorini man murders, many labor riots, spying for left-wing organizations. My favorite, he was part of the group that shot the Archduke in Sarajevo and thus started World War I. See interlude, obviously. I do not care who other people think he was or what they thought of him. And in the Black 19, reads like a confession to lots of black hand killings. You've read B19 already? Yep, finished last night. More foolish than pirate theory? Than ghost of medievally nun theory? Sounds like me 3 years ago to anyone who didn't like Jacob. The ex, by the way. FXC equals sexist? The great writer has to be a man? Maybe FXC was, but there's just not much evidence for Durand. Did it end up mattering what people thought of him? Yeah, because they were right. 3 years wasted. I've been at PSU 7 years, and I'll never get my PhD because of Moody. Durand is a particularly foolish suggestion. All available evidence indicates that V.M. Straka was a man. Do I think he was a dangerous man? Perhaps, if you posed the danger to him. What happened? Too much. Can't you work with another professor? Or at another school? No one in the Straka world will touch me. One guy in Paris, maybe, but he's too old and senile to take on students. Is Jacob the reason you needed an escape? A big reason, not the only one. I care about the artistry of his words and the passion of his convictions. I feel no urge to identify him because I knew him. I saw the world through the eyes of his characters. I heard his voice in his letters and in our discussions in the margins of his typescripts. It's prose like this that shows FXS was a hack. I felt his gratitude for my efforts to bring his stories to a wider audience, his mysteries, his secrets, his mistakes. These are not, have never been, and will never be my concern. 3. I confess it is my most fervent wish that someday my morning mail will contain another one of those creased and ink-stained manila envelopes with a smudged postmark and no return address. That inside it will be one of Straka's customary onion-skin typescripts, written as usual in a language I was not aware the author knew. So Straka knew many languages too? Why use a translator then? See, my pillow is moving and it's uncomfortable. Better. See, Desjardins 1982 suggests VMS wasn't truly fluent, needed someone to clean up. Why not write in the language you actually know? It's crazy. Eccentric equals not crazy. Does not equal crazy. Can't stand how everyone equates those two. Sorry, bad choice of words. Really not what I meant. And that this 20th novel, provocative and delightful, elusive and revelatory, will prove to be a worthy addition to the author's oeuvre. But this will not happen. V.M. Straka is dead. By whose hand, I cannot say. I shall not speculate in print as to who might want Straka dead. Suffice it to say that there are several possibilities, individuals and organizations, and that they all have long reach. Paranoia? Or for real? Both. Secret police docs from France, US, USSR, Germany, Norway show they all wanted him dead. Same with Bouchard and a few other big corporations. And that's where we're going to stop. 4. We're not going to read that yet. I'm going to go back and watch this because I don't know if I like how I'm reading it and if it's actually understandable, because I can look at the page and I can see where I'm jumping to and when I'm jumping from the actual reading and when I'm jumping to their notes. And I'm not sure if it's coming across verbally. I'm going to watch this video and I'm going to watch the video before this again and double check and see how I like them. And we might be reading a different book. And I might really just encourage y'all to read that one on your own. But anyways, thank you so much for joining me, you pretty people, my pretty, pretty people. I'm going to try to get better at this again. This is my life's work. Read more. Let's go. Deuces. See y'all next time.